Back after a 1-week break, it's the Par 4 on PGN. I'm Matt Gajtka with Zac Weiss as we tackle 4 topics from the golf world. And Zac, as we discussed last time, we were on the 10th green, I believe, at the Bob O'Connor course at Shenley Park. The PGA Tour made its closest journey to Pittsburgh for the past 2 weeks in Columbus, Ohio, Dublin to be exact, the home of Muirfield Village. And, of course, Jack Nicklaus's Memorial Tournament pushed back due to COVID-19. But for the first time in, I believe, almost 20 years, maybe even more than 20 years. Yeah, it was the late 90s, the last time the PGA Tour played 2 consecutive tournaments at the same course. But the course, which was the same, couldn't have played more different. We saw Colin Morikawa and Justin Thomas tie at 19 under, and then Morikawa won the inaugural, maybe only, Workday Charity Open 2 weekends ago. Then this past weekend, Jon Rahm at 9 under with an asterisk. He had that perhaps ticky-tack penalty added on, but the bottom line was it was not a score fest. It was a difficult task for the PGA Tour pros this past weekend. So that's where we'll start. A major-like field, Zach, and also a major-like leaderboard in the sense that it was tough. The going was rough, and it got tougher and faster and slicker, and the rough got deeper and harder to escape as the week went on. But Jon Rahm wins it. He wins it. It wasn't even really that close despite a couple hiccups in the middle of Sunday's round. 25-year-old Spaniard, just 25, feels like he's been around for a long time, but just 4 years on tour, and he has ascended to number 1 in the official world golf ranking. What most impressed you about Jon Rahm's performance this past weekend?
I think maybe we should harken back to actually last week as well. The way that Muirfield Village Golf Club sits is as a second shot golf course. So really what you saw last week was a clinic from Colin Morikawa and strokes gained approach the green. No golfer has ever posted at, he's in the top 5, maybe tops, ever in strokes gained approach to green in a competitive round of recently in such a feat. I mean, you have Tiger on that list twice, so to be in that kind of a company is pretty darn good. But what Rahm did is he golfed his golf ball. He did the damage when he had to early in the first 2 rounds. As you said, it very much was a major kind of a setup. The last 2 rounds, the weekend rounds, and really if you look at the numbers, that was the highest ranked round on the PGA Tour since round 1 of the 2018 US Open.
Wow.
And for a non-major, the 2016 round 4 Farmers Insurance Open. So it just goes to show you, even with the rain on Sunday, just how tough of a test it was. I think a lot of people were questioning with the sightlines, how different can this course be with back-to-back weeks? And the first test that passed was nobody seemed to test positive for COVID, and guys like Harris English and Dylan Fratelli, they played as singles, so that wasn't much of a concern. But for Jon Rahm, it was really an emotional kind of a thing. He's an emotional guy. So the back 9 was really, with that delay, can he hold his nerve? Which there were tests, like you said. Of course, there was Rule 9.4, which really probably reminded you and I of the 2016 US Open a little bit with Dustin Johnson.
Yep.
But outside of that, he's an emotional player, but it reminds you a little bit of Seve Ballesteros. I hate to use the countryman stereotype, but he always wore his emotions on his sleeve, for better, for worse. And Jon Rahm is that kind of guy. I mean, he won the Order of Merit last year. He won something on the European Tour last year. He's won every single year he's been on tour. He was a low am that we saw at the US Open. And personally, I still remember 2016 when Jon Rahm won the Nicklaus Award. And he asked Jack kind of meekly, hey, can you sign my trophy for me, in between advice on how to tame Oakmont Country Club. Jon Rahm's a good kid. He's great for the game. He's emotional, but he's not like Bubba Watson emotional. He's not Bryson DeChambeau gets a 10 emotional or anything like that. He's just a guy that really cares about the game, and as the number 1 ranked player in the world now, he's a great steward of the game, and it'll be interesting to see how long his reign lasts.
What did you think about the penalty situation going down the stretch there? Rahm led by 5 going into the 18th, but really it was 3 because, as it turned out, he had just slightly moved his ball, but he did move his ball. I think it's undoubtedly clear that it was moved, that it was a violation of the law, of the rules of golf, even though it wasn't intentional. It appeared there as he set up to make what ended up being the shot of the tournament. So it ends up being a bogey instead of a birdie, but still very significant, and the shot we'll all remember from the tournament. Despite his brilliance from tee to green, he was first in strokes gained there. It was a short game shot in which he probably clinched the thing. But I wasn't crazy about how Slugger White and his crew, Slugger White, the rules boss at the PGA Tour, for lack of a better term, I felt like they could have told Jon on the 18th tee because Jim Nantz had already informed the CBS viewing audience, ourselves included, that they were looking at it. I think at least they could have told Jon they're looking at it. It could be a 2-stroke penalty. So play this hole like you lead by 3 as opposed to by 5. I felt like that would have been more fair as opposed to how it ended up being, where Jon didn't even know about it until Amanda Balionis on the post-game, on the post-round interview. She was in an unfair spot because I think as a journalist, she felt like she had to bring it up, probably being told to bring it up by her producers. I didn't feel like it was her place to bring it up, though. And for me, it didn't taint the ending scene and the emotional scene, as you mentioned there, Jon, letting out some feelings that he's had bottled up due to some deaths in the family and some other things going on with his family. For me, it took away from it because I felt like, at the very least, the PGA Tour could have tipped him off there on the 18th tee.
Jon Rahm, I think he saw shades of Tiger Woods on the green, and why not? I mean, the Tiger Woods shot, he's had 2 magical moments on 16 in his Memorial Tournament career, and Jon Rahm had to see it. It was kind of a tough lie. Even though he said it was a favorable lie where he could have gotten the ball to stop, that green just races so down where even on television you can see that green has a little bit of a downslope on it. Personally, watching it live, I thought the ball moved. I just didn't necessarily want to say anything about it, not necessarily to taint the moment, but I mean, look, it was essentially the coup de grace, and it turned into the world-class bogey, maybe the best bogey that the Memorial Tournament's ever seen by standard. For me personally, CBS kind of showing it like it's an NFL Films replay was kind of interesting. They kind of did the remix back on the ball moving, and Nick Faldo blatantly saying, oh, now the logo's visible, now it's not. See the difference. Slugger White doesn't have a choice. Maybe they just looked at it on 18 after they waited for the 17th, because the 17th is a tough hole. It's uphill. So that provides a shot where you're adding an extra club or two, maybe a very kind of a golf hole. But in that respect, you maybe don't want to tell them. I think the situation, the USGA, what they maybe did right in 2016 was they told Dustin Johnson, hey, we're looking at this. This might be a violation. With Jon Rahm, I mean, it was towards the end of the round, and really it didn't matter much. I mean, you're supposed to be the world number 1. You're going to be the world number 1. 3 shots or 5 shots. You've hit that shot on 18. He hit it a couple years ago. He hit it last week on a couple of instances. So he's familiar with the shot, and he just missed the fairway, if I remember correctly. So it didn't prove to be much consequence. And really, Slugger White, I mean, he said what he had to say. I mean, Amanda's put in a tough position, granted. But again, like you said, she kind of has to say it. And Jon Rahm with the kid in the cookie jar look maybe was captivating, compelling television, which I'm sure is what they were looking for in a round that really didn't have much compelling nature to it. So I think Jon knows that there was no intent. I don't think Jon had any intent. And I think it's much ado about nothing, quite frankly. And I'm sure every single pro in that field would agree with that. But yeah, just sign the card, take the penalty, make sure the card's correct so you don't get a DiVincenzo impersonation. Sign for the trophy, drink a Buckeye milkshake, and move on to the next.
Well, before we move on to the next, and before we move on to the 3M Open, which is where the PGA Tour continues from here, yes, the tour does begin to tour again as it goes to greater Minneapolis, Blaine, Minnesota. In fact, if you're a hockey fan, you know that small town's name has produced quite a few hockey players, also the home of a terrific golf course in the second year for the return of the PGA Tour to Minnesota. But closing the book here on Muirfield Village, Zach, we saw Jack Nicklaus give Jon Rahm the fist bump on the 18th green. There was, well, I know I didn't care for how Jack addressed the press before the tournament, saying that he couldn't give COVID to whoever was going to be the winner on the 18th green. I'm thinking, how do you know that? That seems kind of like a bizarre thing to say, very presumptuous, almost it felt just dismissive. But in the end, he reveals on Sunday on the telecast that he and his wife Barbara already contracted the disease back in March. They have the antibodies, so in theory at least, they literally could not give COVID-19 to anyone there on the 18th green. Just part of a really interesting scenario this week, this past fortnight at Muirfield Village, where, as I mentioned before, you had the oddity of back-to-back tournaments there. You have Jack Nicklaus not in the broadcast booth with Jim Nantz, but cordoned off somewhere else in the clubhouse. But all things considered, though, even with the pall that COVID has cast over big league sports and in some ways the PGA Tour in general, I felt like this was a pretty cool moment for the PGA Tour. Last week you had the Score Fest. Then this week you show off the versatility of the golf course and you show just how much you can push these pros two very different tournaments. I was concerned it was going to feel redundant, but in the end, it didn't feel redundant at all.
I guess this is where I show my double-fisted humble brag.
Yes, this is your cue.
Yardage book, and I can't show the yardage book. That's a sworn to secrecy, but I will show the score. I can show the scorecard. Having played the course 3 separate times, having played the course 3 separate times,
more than me, yeah.
The fairways run like a cold. It's great to watch your ball because you can see, you know how exceptional I am with the driver. So to have it run out so well is really, really good. The greens run forever, and the secret really was you can't really tame the fairways much. You just add the rough length and you make the greens trickier, which they did. I think it was a little bit unfortunate that the greens were kind of 50 shades of whatever color towards the end. I mean, you just had so many hot days, and you finally got that infamous Memorial rain at the end. But those greens, it's really tough to hold those greens when it's 90 degrees every single day of the week. And you see it in anybody's yard, and the same thing can happen regardless of maintaining a green. And I think for the pros, they handled it and rolled with the punches the best that they could. It was a difficult test, but they said it was a fair test, which is very unlike what a lot of times they say about the USGA, which is a lot of times what it looked like, just because some of the pin placements were traditional, but they're tough to get to. Any short was a mistake. Any long, you're hoping for backspin, and then when the rain hit, the backspin you played for was non-existent, so it became a different golf course in that respect, which again added another wrinkle, plus the 15 to 20 mile an hour winds they had to deal with as well. So there definitely was a lot of versatility. As far as Nicklaus, it makes sense. I mean, they're both 80 years old. They're both within that kind of, so to speak, at-risk category. Not to mention they were living in Florida, which of course has been kind of an unofficial hotbed for this whole COVID-19 cases, regardless of the fact. So it makes sense that they got it. And fortunately, Barber was asymptomatic and Jack got over his symptoms, and they both were on the positive side of things after a month's time. Of course, research, who are we to judge? We're not Bill Nye or anything like that, or Dr. Fauci, but there's always the chance that you can develop it again. So, I mean, you can have antibodies one time, but I mean, it seems like CDC or whoever changes their mind all the time anyway, so who's to say he can't contract it again? It was weird to see the fist bump, but I mean, I think it was appropriate given the circumstances of everything. And Jack, I think, led with the handshake, and then Rahm went in with the fist, and Jack said kind of whatever you wanted. It almost looked like rock, paper, scissors for a second, but it was, again, a great moment with Jon saying to Jack how much he appreciated him. It was good vibes around. I mean, Dylan Fratelli, too, got to meet Jack, and they made a big deal where CBS was able to get him in there, and Dylan mentioned that he hoped that the rain had held off so the course could continue to show and grit its teeth a little bit more, which was a nice moment. Of course, especially for Fratelli, there was light at the end of the tunnel given the COVID case and him having to play as a single the last 2 days, as well as, I believe, Harris English. So it was a good 2 weeks. As far as we know, there's no positive cases, which perhaps is his victory of all. And I think Colin McCullough and Jon Rahm would appreciate and agree with that remark. Just as the tour moves forward, even the NBA, there didn't seem to be any positive tests lately. So sports are cautiously trending in the right direction. And for golf to be a big part of that, that's huge and that's important, and that's very in growing the game as things continue to proceed forward.
Well, Rahm's win and his ascension to number one for the first time. Victory for the younger generation, a very exciting generation, I'll say that, on the PGA Tour. But a previous generation containing two superstars in Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson, they were also heard from this past weekend. So for our fourth shot on the par four, Zach, I'm going to ask you to make a call here, make a call on a toss-up. Who do you think had the more interesting week? Was it Tiger returning from nearly 5 months off? Last time he played was at the Genesis Invitational, his invitational tournament in Los Angeles, and went up and down. Putter, not so good. Ball striking, pretty good with the exception of Friday when his body didn't behave. Or do you think Phil Mickelson at the ripe old age of 50, looking as spry as ever, hitting flop shots off the fairway from 10 yards out, putting from 70 yards out, laying up on a par three? Phil was certainly in full Phil form this past weekend. I was definitely keeping my eye on Tiger, but in the end, I felt like Phil actually maybe upstaged him in terms of that older generation and at least from the entertainment perspective.
I mean, I'll give honorable mentions to Memorial having to conduct its resurfacing as the round was going on, and they stripped everything. And I'll also give an honorable mention to Bryson DeChambeau for a second opinion when he recorded that 10 which might have been
Also
more
interesting.
intriguing than both of them. Bryson just being Bryson again. I have to give it to Tiger. I mean, we haven't seen the guy in an official competition, what, 5, 6, whatever months at this point? I mean, the match is the match, but I mean, what was the highlight? Tom Brady split his pants and hold out from the fairway. I mean, what else really can you gain from that other than Tiger's calves looked small and his game looked good? I mean, what else can you really say about it? So I think you chalk up Tiger Woods' Friday just being the fact that yes, he's played Medalist, which is his home course, but he's taken a cart for that. So these are really his first competitive rounds that he's walking, and Memorial, specifically the 10th hole, is not the easiest walk. Some of it's very uphill, some of it's elevated, it's different surfaces. And of course, Tiger on Friday and Sunday kind of got tours of the golf course that maybe he didn't want to relive memory lane down. For him to make the cut on number, I think is good because he might not have to play the WGC event in Memphis, depending on how things go. And he might just say, hey, I have to work on my putting. My ball striking's good. That's good enough for major down the line outside of or FedEx Cup or the bigger events. So for Phil, really the highlight was that long putt. But quite frankly, going back to this little thing here, the same hole, because the fairways were running so fast, I think I was about 30 yards out, and my caddy just told me, just hit the heck out of it. It's probably better than a chip anyways. You'll get the ball to stop a lot easier. I stuck it to about 8 feet and made my bogey. So it made sense. I think he was a little bit too far out, but the shot made sense in nature just because I don't think a flop was the play and a knockdown shot, the green was just going to roll it off. So it was really the highest percentage shot he had in terms of getting the ball to stay on the green. Unfortunately, to get the ball to stay on the green, you have to hit the ball on the green, which, of course, fascinating Phil did not do. But really what Phil did was he was probably 10 or 11 over on his favorite hole, number 16, over the 2 weeks. He got a tour of the water. He got to snorkel a little bit. He got to curse his luck on 16. But really the story has to be Tiger because he was there. We haven't seen him for a while. He got to walk. He came, he saw, he mediocred. And really we'll just have to see what all of it bodes for him. I think Phil's kind of been up and down with his game. He's shown flashes, but he hasn't shown 4 rounds. We haven't seen 4 rounds from Tiger, so kind of incomplete grade on both. So I guess 4 honorable mentions. Really long answer to that question.
Well, apologies to Phil, who's been out there a lot more than Tiger has this year. And like I said, at 50, he's showing no signs of retiring, quote unquote, to the Champions Tour. So kudos to him. He's lost a ton of weight. He looks as good as he's ever looked in terms of his body composition. But he has not won a major in several years, and Tiger Woods did just last year. So if you're talking about who's more relevant on the big stage, I think it's still Tiger, even though, as we know, the back can be a little bulky. But at the same time, he has shown it a little bit more in terms of putting 4 rounds together in the past couple of years. Won twice last year. Actually, he's won this season, technically. The Zozo back in Japan in October was part of the 2019-20 season, which seems ridiculous at this point, but it still counts in the record books as a win this year. And then the Tour Championship going back almost a couple of years now. So the PGA Championship, the season's first major, Glory's first shot this time around, is coming up in 3 weeks. 3M Open next week. Then it's the St. Jude in Memphis, the one that replaced the tournament at Firestone, the World Golf Championships. We'll be back with you next week to talk about the lead up to major season. We're going to have 7 majors in 12 months, and it starts in 3 weeks, early next month at Harding Park in San Francisco. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but just giving you a preview of what's to come. And then the LPGA Tour does return, as does the European Tour as well. So PGA's had the main stage, the only stage, for the past several weeks, and now it's time to share it once again. All right, Zach, thanks again. Good to talk to you. Thanks for powering through that cold for us, too.
Yeah, I'm down about 10 pounds, so
Ooh,
not
wow.
the way I wanted to lose 10 pounds, but hey, I'll take that over the COVID positive, and I hope that everybody else is staying safe in these tough times, and hopefully they sound a little better than I'm sounding now.
You sounded fine. You trucked through it. You were definitely gritty, gutty, just like Jon Rahm was to get through that tough stretch in the middle of Sunday's round. For Zach, I'm Matt. We'll talk to you next time on PGN's Par 4 on Pittsburgh Sports Live.